Shabbat Shalom, Israel.
Shabbat Shalom.
Welcome to the New Covenant Congregation of Israel, the Tabernacle Elohim, the convocation of the mighty Elohim, Yah, who has commanded us to keep this Sabbath day holy because it is a sign, and I repeat, it is a sign between Him and us for a perpetual covenant throughout all of our generations. So again, I want to welcome everyone here to this place of convocation, to this place of worship and service, where we come together to learn how to serve this great deity according to His will, not according to our will, but according to His will. Today's class is titled The Nazarene. Today's class is titled The Nazarene. The objective of today's class is to understand what name was applied to the people of the New Covenant who followed Yahshua and practice the New Covenant theology. What was the theology or doctrine that they studied and practiced? How do they compare to the sect of the Christians? Are they the same group or a totally different group of people with a totally different set of practices? What happened to the Nazarenes, and how did the early church fathers of Christianity feel about them? What was their perspective on this group called the Nazarenes? What were the feelings of the Nazarenes towards the early Christian church fathers? This and much more will be covered in today's discussion titled The Nazarene. I would like to state to our visitors and listeners that the form that we use for teaching is based upon comparatives. We merely take what's in the Bible as a word of the highest Elohim and compare it with the doctrine and practices of the world, yes, mainly Christianity, and other applicable religions if necessary. Our belief is one cannot understand the truth unless the lie is also being presented, and one cannot see a lie unless the truth is shown. So please understand we're not judging anyone or any organization, but merely speaking the word and comparing it to what Christianity and other religions in this world teaches. Today's reader will be Brother Yishmaiah of NCCI Charlotte. Let's go ahead and begin our discussion at Acts chapter 9, verses 1 through 2. This is, we have a lot of scripture to go through as well as a lot of secular information. So certainly if you have questions, please chime in. If you'd like to interject, please chime in. Give us a second to get to you so you can speak into the mic so those that are on the outside of the sanctuary will be able to hear you and be edified as well. It's very important that if you have comments, it's very important if you have questions, or if you'd like to interject anything, it's very important that you do so. This is the forum that we have, so everybody can be edified, including myself. Okay, let's pick it up at Acts chapter 9, and we're going to read verse 1 through 2. Acts chapter 9, verse 1 through 2. Again, the title of this class is The Nazarene.
And so, yet breathing out threatenings and slaughter against the disciples of the Master, went unto the high priest, and desired of him letters to Damascus to the synagogues, that if he found any of this way...
Well, what's this way? What's this way? What's this way? If he found any of this way. He didn't say if he found any Christian. He didn't say if he found any Nazarene. Say if he found any of this way. Go ahead.
Whether they were men or women, he might bring them bound unto Jerusalem.
Okay. Acts 19, 8 through 9. Acts 19, 8 through 9. Acts chapter 19, 8 through 9. Today we will have a very clear and a very clean understanding of what the practitioners of the New Covenant were called. What were they called? Were they called Christians or were they called something else? Were they called Muslims? Go ahead.
And he went into the synagogue and spoke boldly for the space of 3 months, disputing and persuading the things concerning the kingdom of Elohim. But when divers were hardened and believed not, but spoke evil of that way before the multitude, he departed from them and separated the disciples, disputing daily in the school of one Nazarenes.
Okay. But when some were hardened and believed not, but spoke evil of that way, before the multitude, he departed from them and separated the disciples, disputing daily in the school of one Nazarenes. Okay. Go ahead and pick it up at verse 21 through 23, please.
After these things were ended, Saul purposed in the spirit, when he had passed through Macedonia and Achaia, to go to Jerusalem, saying, after I have been there, I must also see Rome. So he sent into Macedonia 2 of them that ministered unto him, Timothy and Erastus, but he himself stayed in Asia for a season. In the same time, there arose no small stir about that way.
About that way. And in some of your secular material, you're going to see way is capitalized, right? It's a proper noun, okay? Way, all right? And the same time, there arose no small stir about that way. There is a Christian denomination called Followers of the Way. And Followers of the Way, how many of you are familiar with denomination Followers of the Way? Does anybody know their theological beliefs and practices? Anybody familiar with it? Okay. It's not according to the way we find here in this book, I can tell you that. Okay? They hold to the same central teachings of the Catholic Church. Okay? All right, let's go ahead and pick it up at Acts 22, 1 through 4. Acts 22, 1 through 4.
Men, brethren, and fathers, hear you my defense which I make now unto you. And when they heard that he spoke in the Hebrew tongue to them that kept the more silence, and he said, I am verily a man which am a Jew.
Now he said I was a Christian now. Okay. He says I'm a Jew. Go ahead.
I am verily a man which am a Jew, born in Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, yet brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel, and taught according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers.
Taught according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers. Just keep that in your mind. And taught according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers, and was zealous towards Elohim. How many of you are zealous towards Elohim? How many of you are zealous towards Elohim? How many of us are zealous towards Elohim? Do we even know what it means to be zealous towards Elohim? And was zealous towards Elohim as you all are this day. And I persecuted what? Persecuted this way unto the death, binding and delivering into prisons both men and women. Okay, let's see what this way is called. Let's go to Acts 24, 1 through 5.
And after 5 days, Ananias the high priest descended with the elders and with a certain orator named Tertullus, who informed the governor against Saul. And when he was called forth, Tertullus began to accuse him, saying, seeing that by you we enjoy great quietness, and that very worthy deeds are done unto this nation by your providence. We accept it always and in all places, most noble Felix.
Most noble Felix, go ahead.
With all thankfulness, notwithstanding that I be not further tedious unto you, I pray you that you would hear us of your clemency a few words.
Right, okay, now go ahead.
For we have found this man.
Now who's this man now?
Saul.
Saul. Saul is this man. For we have found this man, Tumshi.
A pestilent fellow.
He's a pestilent fellow.
And a mover of sedition.
A mover of sedition.
Among all the Hebrews.
Among all the Hebrews.
Throughout the world.
Throughout the world.
And a ringleader of the sect.
And a ringleader of the sect.
Of the Nazarenes.
Of the Nazarenes. of the Nazarenes, right? Now, watch what Felix says, or watch what Luke writes about Felix. Go and read verse 22. So we're bringing a Nazarene, okay, to be judged, right? We're bringing not just a Nazarene, but a ringleader of the Nazarenes, okay, to be judged, right? Okay. Now watch what Felix equates to be a Nazarene. Go ahead.
And when Felix heard these things, having more perfect knowledge of that way.
Of that way. The way of the Nazarenes, not the way of Christianity, right? Why? Because it never appeared in your Bible. It never appeared in your book until the Gnostics, okay, translated from Hebrew to Greek, okay, and they inserted, right, Christian in the book under the directive, okay, or guidance, if you will, of Ignatius. He was the first one to use that term. Go ahead and pick it up at verse 22.
And when Felix heard these things, having more perfect knowledge of that way, he deferred them and said, when Lysias, the chief captain, shall come down, I will know the uttermost of your matter. Okay, all right. That way is a unique way, the way of the Nazarenes. And today we are going to attempt to have an exhaustive, study on the sect of the Nazarenes. Okay, let's see who the Nazarenes were. Let's see who they are today. And let's see who is heir to the kingdom, okay? All right, let's go ahead and pick it up at our first bullet, my brother. Christianity. The word does not occur in the Bible.
That's right.
In Greek, Christianismos, Christianism, Christianity was first used by Ignatius.
This was after the death of the apostles, okay? After the death of the apostles. Go ahead.
Ignatius, also called Theophorus, Theophorus, born in Syria around the year 50.
That's right.
Died at Rome between 98 and 117. Bishop of Antioch.
Bishop of Antioch. Bishop of Antioch. And what you're going to find, in Luke's epistles is that they were called Christian first at Antioch. They were not called Christians first at Antioch. Okay. Christian was a term that was created and used by everyone after Ignatius. They were called followers of Mashiach, right? Followers of the anointed, okay, at Antioch, or Nazarenes at Antioch, okay? Now go ahead and pick it up at our second bullet. Let's see what a Nazarene is.
Nazarene, a native or inhabitant of Nazareth.
Go ahead.
A member of a sect of early Christians of Jewish origin who retained many of the prescribed Jewish observances.
A member of a sect of early Christians of Jewish origin, okay? Y'all just might as well strike that out of your mind. A member of a sect of early Christians of Jewish origin, who, now notice what it says here, who retained, this is what the Nazarenes did now, who retained many of the prescribed Jewish observances, excerpted from the American Heritage Dictionary of the English Language. Next bullet, please.
Nazarenes, religion. In the New Testament, see Bible, followers of Yahshua the Anointed, Acts 24 and 5. The earliest Christians were sometimes referred to as Nazarenes, particularly by their Jewish contemporaries. In later church history, the term was applied to a sect of 4th century Jewish Christians who observed Jewish ritual. Okay, no such thing as a Jewish Christian, which you will learn a little bit later in this discussion. Okay, next bullet, please. Thus, a new Jewish sect arose known as the Nazarenes. Thus, a new Jewish sect, not no Jewish Christian. A new Jewish sect arose known as the Nazarenes. Under the leadership of James, based on the belief in, and they have Jesus here, continued messiahship. The Pharisees did not regard the sect as heretical. Is that right, Barak? Heretical? Okay. Indeed, the Nazarenes were regarded as being within the Pharisee party. Regarded as being within the Pharisee party. In other words, strong similarities. This is from Revolution in Judea, page 168. Next bullet, please. Actually, the name Nazarenes only occurs about a dozen times in Talmudic literature.
Uh-huh.
In all but 2 of these instances, it refers to Jesus the Nazarene.
Uh-huh.
Half of these passages were censored in the Middle Ages.
Go back and read that again.
Actually, the name Nazarene only occurs about a dozen times in Talmudic literature.
Uh-huh.
In all but 2 of these instances, it refers to Jesus the Nazarene.
Mm-hmm.
Half of these passages were censored in the Middle Ages,
either by Christian censors or Jewish editors for fear of them. Okay? I will tell you that it was edited by the Christians. That's what I will tell you, and I will be able to substantiate that momentarily. The censored passages were restored to the Talmud by R.N.N. Rabonavantich, or well, we just call him Rabbi, from older MSS, okay? From references to the early Nazarenes from various sources, we have learned a number of vitally important things about them. For example, we have discovered that they used both Old and New Testaments, believed in the resurrection of the dead, had a knowledge of Hebrew and read the Old Testament and at least one gospel in that language, believed Elohim is the creator of all things, believed in one Elohim and his son Yahshua the Anointed. Nazarenes never believed that Yahshua was the Almighty God, but they did believe that he indeed was the Son of God, which is verified throughout the epistles, throughout all of the epistles. Believed in one Elohim, or one God, and his Son, Yahshua the Anointed, observed the law of Moses, had a high respect for the writings of the Apostle Paul. Okay? All right. We're talking about the sect of the Nazarenes. We're talking about the sect of the Nazarenes. Now, let's go and read what the Christians wrote about them. Not what Nazarenes wrote about Nazarenes, but what about, but let's go and read what Christians wrote about Nazarenes, okay? First bullet, please.
Church Confessions, a history of anti-Semitism.
You got that right.
Epiphanius. We shall now especially consider heretics who call themselves Nazarenes, these heresies, passing over the name of Jesus, do not call themselves Aesians.
We didn't call ourselves right after Jesus. Go ahead.
And did not keep the name Jews. They did not call themselves Christians.
That's correct.
But Nazarenes.
But Nazarenes. Go ahead.
Taking this name from the place Nazareth.
Now, this is Epiphanius, okay, one of the early church fathers, okay, you know, who was talking about these Nazarenes in his epistle, okay? Go ahead.
They are mainly Jews and nothing else. They make use not only of the New Testament, but they also use it in a way of the Old Testament Jews. For they do not forbid the books of the law, the prophets, and the writings.
That's right.
So that they are approved of by the Jews,
right,
from whom the Nazarenes do not differ in anything. And they profess all the dogmas pertaining to the prescriptions of the law and to the custom of the Jews, except they believe in the Messiah.
Except they believe in the Messiah. The difference between, right, one under the old order and the new order, right? The new order practices the precepts of the old order, with the exception they believe in Yahshua as a son of Elohim. Okay, go ahead.
They preach that there is but one Elohim and his son Yahshua the Messiah. But they are very learned in the Hebrew language. For they, like the Jews, read the whole law, then the prophets. They differ from Jews because they believe in the Messiah, and from the Christians in that they are to this day bound to the Jewish rites, such as circumcision, the Sabbath, and other ceremonies. They have the good news according to Matthew in its entirety in Hebrew. Right, go ahead. For it is clear that they still preserve this in the Hebrew alphabet as it was originally written. Okay, this is confession of what's his name again? Epiphanius? Epiphanius, okay. All right, next bullet, please. These Jewish believers in Messiah were called Pasaganinians, who are so named by the Italians from the Latin word Passagium, meaning passage, because of the wandering, unsettled life of these people. Okay, wandering, unsettled life of these people. Wandering and unsettling.
Go ahead.
Gregorius of Pergamo wrote about the Nazarenes, Pasagini in 1250 CE stating.
1250 CE. So we're talking about what, 800 years ago? Around 800 years ago, maybe? Okay, go ahead.
There still remains the sect of the Pasagini. They teach that the Old Testament festivals are to be observed, circumcision, distinction of food,
go ahead,
and nearly all other matters save the sacrifices.
Except the sacrifices. See, they teach that you have to keep the Sinaitic covenant. The only thing that they teach against are the sacrifices. Okay? So, I mean, they're called Nazarenes, and then you had Italians, right, you know, called them Pasagini, wanderers, right? And Nazarene ain't been called a Christian yet. Go ahead, read.
The Old Testament is to be observed as literally as the New.
Right. We observe the Old Testament as the New, not no old. And so I think you have some secular history on that. The division of the Old and New Testament, if you will, was a concept of one of the early church fathers. Is this correct? Okay. All right. Let's see. The Old Testament is to be observed as literally as the New. Circumcision is to be kept according to the letter. In other words, 8th day. Go ahead, next bullet.
Justin Martyr in a letter to Nazarenes.
Okay, we had church father Epiphanius. We have our other church father Gregorius, right, of Bergamo. And let's go and see what church father. Now, our church fathers are Christians. They are Christians, okay? And I didn't have this this secular history explained out in any depth. The reason why you had the term Christian that was created. The reason that the term Christian was created was to create a religious body that was separate and that was anti-Hebraic. That was the purpose for creating the term Christian. Okay? And you can go back and you can verify that, and some of that will be verified here in our discussion on this Sabbath.
Justin Martyr in a letter to Nazarenes concerning Jewish practices. As for their scrupulousness about meats and their superstitions about the Sabbath, and their much vaunted circumcision, and their pretentious festivals and new moon observances, all of them too nonsensical to be worth discussing. Fifth epistle to Nazarenes.
Yes, all of them too nonsensical to be worth discussing. Right? We want to talk about that mess. That mess, right? And then understand something. They're talking about the Nazarenes, people. Okay, they're talking about the Nazarenes. And here you have a Hebrew that has accused Saul of being the ringleader of the Nazarenes. But when we go in and we qualify and define who Nazarenes are, right, they keep the customs, okay, that the Most High established amongst their fathers, right? In other words, they practice the covenant. That's what the Nazarenes. The only difference is that they believe that Yahshua, the Anointed, is indeed the Son of Elohim, okay, and that you have to be purified, okay? Go ahead and read.
Epistle of Ignatius, Bishop of Antioch, to the Maxians in 115 CE.
Okay, go ahead. Now let's see what he wrote to his churches that he was the overseer of. Go ahead.
To profess Jesus Christ while continuing to follow Jewish customs is an absurdity. Okay,
this is what the first bishop of Antioch says. To profess Jesus Christ while continuing. Okay? So this suggests that Ignatius was pulling people from practicing what they call Jewish rites or Jewish rituals while professing the Anointed, right? So what is Ignatius doing? He is removing people from Nazarene theology. That is what he's doing. Does everybody follow that? Because our secular history is going to get very disturbing here in a little bit, okay? So we just need to understand what the motive and what these Christian church fathers are doing. Okay, go ahead and read.
To profess Jesus Christ while continuing to follow Jewish customs is an absurdity.
Okay, now, you know, John the Revelator, okay, was exiled to the Isle of Patmos, and we have his epistle in the year 96 CE. Okay, and we have this epistle being written, okay, to one of Ignatius' assembly in Magnesia, okay, and 115 CE. So not soon after, okay, after the death of the last apostle, or the so-called last apostle, do we see this? Do we see that this what you call it, this mess being communicated? But go ahead.
The Christian faith does not look to Judaism.
The Christian faith does not look to Judaism. The Christian faith does not look to Judaism. The Christian faith does not look to Judaism. Why? Because it is an entity of itself. Go ahead.
But Judaism looks to Christianity.
Judaism looks to Christianity. Okay. Go ahead and read.
Tertullian concerning the Sabbath and circumcision. It follows according that insofar as the abolition of carnal circumcision and of the old law is demonstrated as having been consummated at its specific times, so also the observance of the Sabbath is demonstrated to have been temporary.
Demonstrated to have been temporary. Okay. This is from Tertullian. Tertullian. Okay. Next bullet, please.
Augustine. The true image of the Hebrew is Judas Iscariot.
Okay. The true image of the Hebrew is Judas Iscariot. Go ahead.
Who sells the master for silver. The Jew can never understand the scriptures and forever will bear the guilt for the death of Yahshua.
Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and pick it up at our next bullet.
Jerome. Those who accept the Messiah.
In other words, who are the Nazarenes? Who are the Nazarenes? Okay, go ahead.
Those who accept the Messiah in such a way.
They are those who accept the Messiah. They are those who accept the Messiah. Go ahead.
In such a way that they do not cease to observe the old law. Jerome on Is 8:14.
Go ahead.
They believe in the anointed, the son of Elohim, born of Mary the Virgin, and they say about him that he suffered under Pontius Pilate and rose again.
Go ahead.
And they have mixed faith in the anointed with the keeping of the law.
Okay, let's go and run down some scriptures. Isaiah 8. Isaiah 8, and let's pick it up at 16 and 20. Jerome brought this up as he was expounding on Isaiah 8 and 14. Okay? Nazarenes have the perfect understanding of the will of the Most High. And the will of the Most High is to be obedient, okay, to his code of ethics, okay, and to have the testimony of his son, Yahshua. To accept him as a propitiation for our iniquity, and to accept him as the mediator, as the intercessor, and as the king over all of the earth, to fulfill the prophetic statement that he will sit on David's throne and will establish a theocracy upon the face of this earth. Okay, Isaiah 8, and let's go ahead and finish with Jerome's discussion regarding 14, 15, and 16. Go ahead.
Bind up the testimony.
Bind up the testimony.
Seal the law among my disciples.
Okay, the law among my disciples. Seal the law among my disciples. Seal the law among my disciples. Verse 20.
To the law and to the testimony. If they speak not according to this word, it is because there is no light in them.
To the law and to the testimony. If anyone who speaks to you does not speak according to the law and to the testimony, it is because there is no truth in them. Matthew chapter 7, 21 through 23. We want to understand what is Nazarene theology. One of the reasons why Hebraic assemblies, and I can certainly speak for this Hebraic assembly, feels uncomfortable with saying, well, we practice Nazarene theology, is because how many churches, Christian churches, do you know called Church of the Nazarenes? They are loaded. And they all on Sunday worship. They do not observe the law, okay? The law has been fulfilled, right? They use Jesus Christ a whole nine. And this is, well, we're going to see if this is what the Nazarenes did according to the Bible, according to the Scriptures. Matthew chapter 7, 21 through 23.
Not everyone that says unto me, Master, Master, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but But he that does the will of my Father,
But
which
he
is
that
in
does the
heaven.
will of Jesus, go ahead.
But he that does the will of my Father.
Okay, but he that does the will of Christ, go ahead.
But he that does the will of my Father, which is in heaven.
Go ahead.
Many will say to me in that day, Master, Master, have we not prophesied in your name?
That's right.
And in your name have cast out devils? And in your name done many wonderful works.
Okay, let's make sure. Okay, now let's just go ahead and go through our elimination, okay, process here, okay. Muslims, you can throw them out, okay. Allah and Muhammad, right? Not Yahshua, not Mashiach, not Christ, anything of that nature. Hindus, throw them out. Buddhists, throw those guys out. Shintoisms and me-isms and I-isms, throw all that stuff out, okay? So we are left with two groups, two ecclesiastical units, Nazarenes and Christians. Nazarenes and Christians. All secular information points to the fact that the Nazarenes practice the Sinaitic covenant, with the exception of the sacrifices. In other words, they kept law. They practiced law. The Christians stated that law was not to be observed, that it had been annulled, promulgated right on Mount Sinai, okay, but was fulfilled in the blood of the Messiah. Okay? All right, go ahead.
And in your name done many wonderful works. And then will I profess unto them, I never knew you.
I never knew you. Now, this is the time of refreshing. This is the time of judgment. And Yahshua is going to say something very specific to them. Go ahead.
Depart from me, you that work iniquity.
You that work iniquity. Now, how many of you have a marker by iniquity in your books? Okay? And what does it say in your book? Lawlessness. Yahshua says, depart from me, you that what? Work lawlessness. Notice what he says. He says, and then will I profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you that work lawlessness. In other words, this is their practice. Keep in your mind, work lawlessness. They don't even acknowledge the law. They don't acknowledge the law. The law does not exist to them. In the very last day, they say, or Yahshua will say, get away from me, you who have not observed law. Okay, let's continue. Matthew 13 and 41. Let's bring Yahshua on back to this earth, and let's see what takes place.
The Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that offend.
I'm trying to find, what do we offend against? I mean, what do we offend against? I mean, he shall gather out of his kingdom all things that offend. Offend. Go ahead.
And them which do iniquity.
And them which do iniquity. How many of you have a marker by iniquity? Lawlessness. Okay, so let's backtrack. The Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that offend, and them which do not practice law. Okay. Let's go to Matthew, let's pick it up at Luke chapter 16, 9 through 31. Luke chapter 16, 19 through 31. We want to understand exhaustively who the Nazarenes are, who they were, what MO, what was their MO, what was their method of operation, okay? You know, RP, their religious practices, okay? You know, their TO, their theocratic ordinances, okay? Let's go ahead and pick it up at Luke 16, 19 through 31. The so-called doctrine arose out of Nazareth because Yahshua was the Nazarene, Yahshua of Nazareth, right? And so what we have is some correction, okay, in the writings, as where you would find many scholars, okay, states that it really should have been not Yahshua of Nazareth, but Yahshua the Nazarene. Okay, go ahead.
There was a certain rich man, which was clothed in purple and fine linen, and fared sumptuously every day.
Yeah.
And there was a certain beggar named Lazarus, which was laid at his gate full of sores, and desiring to be fed with the crumbs which fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, the dogs came and licked his sores. And it came to pass that the beggar died and was carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died and was buried. And in hell he lifted up his eyes, being in torments, and seeth Abraham afar off, and Lazarus in his bosom.
Okay, now this is where the Christians come and quote that you go off to heaven if you've been good, and you go off to hell if you've been bad, right? And you say, well, no, that's really not true. This is a parable. No, it was not a parable. Okay, all right, hold your place right here, and let's go over to John, the 3rd chapter, and pick it up at John chapter 3, verse 13. Okay, let's go ahead and put the poor man in heaven. John 3 and 13.
And no man has ascended up to heaven.
Okay. No man has ascended up to heaven, but he that came down from heaven, even the Son of Man which is in heaven. Now, how in the world can he be in heaven? And he's sitting back here talking to Nicodemus. So he's speaking prophetically. Okay? But he says, no man has ascended up to heaven. So that took care of Enoch, and that took care of Elijah. Okay? And that also takes care of your poor man. No man has ascended up to heaven. How about those who have descended into hell? Well, let's go over to Revelations and let's pick that up. Go over to Revelations and pick it up at Revelations chapter 19 and pick it up at verse 20.
And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast.
That's right.
And them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive in a lake of fire burning with brimstone.
Okay, all right. So we just threw them over in the lake of fire, okay, with the rich man. So let's go over here and read Revelation chapter 20 and pick it up at verse 10.
And the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are.
And the rich man.
Where the beast and the false prophet are.
And the wealthy.
And the beast and the false prophet are. And shall be tormented day and night forever and ever.
Okay, and then we have three entities over here in the lake of fire. Where the rich man? Where the rich man? Let's go back to Luke chapter 16. Luke chapter 16. Everybody missed the nation, 68% of the world population, 4 out of 6, okay, missed what Yahshua was talking about because they were so eager to do away with the Hebraic culture, so eager. And, it is, the Gnostics created opportunities, literally created opportunities, found some opportunities to try to paint a picture that the law no longer exists. Go ahead.
And it came to pass that the beggar died and was carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died and was buried. And in hell he lifted up his eyes, being in torment.
Go ahead.
Sees Abraham afar off, and Lazarus in his bosom.
That's right.
And he cried and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me.
And send Lazarus that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue. For I am tormented in this flame. Like a little bit of water going to just satisfy that, right? Just look at this now. But Abraham said, Son, remember that you in your lifetime receivest your good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things. But now he is comforted, and you are tormented. And beside all this, between us and you, there's a great gulf fixed, so that they which would pass from hence to you cannot. Neither can they pass to us that would come from thence. Then he said, I pray you, therefore, Father, that you would send him to my father's house. For I have 5 brethren, that he may testify unto them, lest they also come into this place of torment. Go ahead, Yishmael.
Abraham said unto him, they have Moshe and the prophets, let them hear them.
Read 29 again.
And Abraham said unto him,
they have Moses and the prophets. They have Moses and the prophets. Remember, in the book of Isaiah, the Spirit of Elohim said, seal the law amongst my disciples. Then he says, to the law and to the testimony of the prophets. To the law and to the prophets. If they don't speak according to the law and the prophets, there is no truth in them. Yahshua is bringing everybody back to the basic foundation of the truth. And that's the law and the prophets. Tomshi.
And he said, Nay, Father Abraham, but if one went unto them from the dead, they will repent. And he said unto him,
if they do not hear Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded, though one rose from the dead. If they don't hear Moses and they do not hear the prophets, neither will they be persuaded, although one rose from the dead. The moral of the story, brothers and sisters, is that you've got to, what? Keep the law. You have got to have your spiritual foundation rooted in the law and the prophets. There's nothing new in the New Testament. That is Christian rhetoric. Okay? All right. Let's go to Acts chapter 2. Now, these are the things that Yahshua said. Okay? Let's go ahead and pick it up at Matthew chapter 5. Go ahead and pick it up at verse 17. Matthew chapter 5, and let's pick it up at verse 17.
Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets.
Don't think that I've come to destroy the law or the prophets. Go ahead.
Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill.
And he's come to fulfill the prophets, right? The prophecy speaks of 2 advents, his first coming and his second coming, right? Yahshua came to fulfill his first advent, his first coming. And he did that, right? But we are left with the prophetic fulfillment of his second advent. That is yet to be fulfilled. Go ahead.
For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law, till all be fulfilled.
Till all be fulfilled. Till all be fulfilled. The prophecies speaks of a theocratic kingdom that has not yet been fulfilled. The prophecy speaks of Yahshua reigning on his father's throne, David. That is yet to be fulfilled. Go ahead.
Whosoever therefore shall break one of these least commandments and shall teach men so, he shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven.
All right. Okay. Now let's go ahead and springboard. Let's go ahead and springboard in the New Testament, right? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is the Old Testament. So let's go ahead and go into the New Testament. Let's go to the book of Acts, and let's pick it up at Acts chapter 2, verse 1 through 15. Acts chapter 2, verse 1 through 15.
And when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place. And suddenly there came a sound from heaven as
Now, my question is, why you have 120 people, on the day of Pentecost all in one place? And all of these are disciples on the day of Pentecost, right? which is what we're going to be having this evening, okay? And all of us are going to be in one place on one accord, okay? Now, how many Christian bodies will be keeping Pentecost this evening, okay? Y'all tell me one. Tell me one. You got one, brother? You don't have one? Can you make up one for me? Okay. None. All right. Go ahead and finish reading.
And suddenly there came a sound from heaven.
Now, the point I'm bringing out is that now we have Hebrews, okay, that have been purified in the name of Yahshua, okay. Yahshua has now ascended into heaven, okay. He ascended into heaven 10 days ago, okay. 10 days ago, he ascended into heaven, okay. And they're hanging around, okay. They're observing Pentecost, okay. Go ahead.
And suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared unto them cloven tongues like as of fire, and it sat upon each of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Spirit, and began to speak with other tongues, as the Spirit gave them utterance.
Now we know that all of these are angels. Go ahead. And the angels spoke. Go ahead.
And there were dwelling at Jerusalem Hebrews, devout men out of every nation under heaven. Now when this was noised abroad, the multitude came together and were confounded, because that every man heard them speak in his own language.
Go ahead.
And they were all amazed and marveled, saying one to another, Behold, are not all these which speak Galileans? And how hear we every man in our own tongue, wherein we were born?
Go ahead.
Parthians, Medes, Elamites, and the dwellers in Mesopotamia, and in Judea, Cappadocia, and Pontus, and Asia, Phrygia, Pamphylia, and Egypt, and in the parts of Libya about Cyrene, and strangers of Rome, Hebrews, and proselytes. Cretes and Arabians, we do hear them speak in our tongues the wonderful works of Elohim. And they were all amazed and were in doubt, saying one to another, What does this mean? Others mocking said, These men are all full of new wine. But Simeon, standing up with the 11, lifted up his voice and said unto them, You men of Judea, and all you that dwell at Jerusalem, be this known unto you, and listen to my words. For these are not drunken, as you suppose, seeing it is but the third hour of the day.
Okay, now I wanted to pick that up because you have Christians who say that Yahshua and the apostles and people, they did not drink, they did not drink fermented wine. They drank unfermented wine, okay? And wine is wine in the scriptures, yayin, okay? And that is wine of intoxicants, if you will, or the ability to intoxicate. So here we have the term new wine being used, which would suggest new wine is basically grape juice, okay? Now, one of the ways that you can refute and rebut that scripturally is if new wine is grape juice, then why do we have here in verse 13 the people saying, others mocking said, these men are full of new wine? Then Simeon comes back and says, Simeon standing up with the 11 lifted up his voice and said unto them, You men of Judea, and all you that dwell at Jerusalem, be this known unto you, and hearken to my words, for these are not drunken as you. I've never ever seen anybody get drunken off grape juice. Never ever seen that before. Okay? All right, but again, that's people in that's people in their Christian state. All right, and we're gonna deal with that. Right? There are doctrines that does not make any sense whatsoever. And you can't even make it make sense. All right. Go ahead and pick it up. Acts chapter 4. So, the very first thing that we see, those which are associated with Nazarenes, they are observing, okay, Shavuot, right? They're observing Pentecost. That's the first thing that we see, okay? All right? So, that's your highlight number one. And what you do is this. You just ask your friends, your associates, your devout Christians and pastors and religious leaders, explain to me the events of the first 30 years of the church. Explain these events that's taken place the first 30 years of the church, right? Event number one, why do we have 120 some odd people together on Pentecost? Why? That's the question, okay? All right, now let's move on to number 2. Acts 4:10 through 12.
Be it known unto you all and to all the people of Israel that by the name of Yahshua the Anointed of Nazareth, whom you crucified, whom Elohim raised from the dead, even by him does this man stand here before you whole.
Go ahead.
This is the stone which was set at naught of you builders, which has become the head of the corner. Neither is there salvation in any other.
Neither is there salvation in any other name. Go ahead.
For there is none other name under heaven given among men whereby we must be saved.
Okay, Acts 26:12 through 15. Acts 26:12 through 15. We see that in the prophecies in the book of Zechariah. We have the brothers coming out of the Babylonian captivity and one Yahshua, okay? And he became the symbol of the promised Messiah, right? Called the branch and called by name Yahshua. So this was the prophetic statement that was made as it relates to the Messiah's name. This is the reason why the angel Gabriel told Mary she had to name him Yahshua. Yah is salvation. That name had to be given unto him at birth because the angel Gabriel said it's already been spoken. Go ahead and read.
Whereupon as I went to Damascus with authority.
I mean, people say, well, what's in the name? Y'all call him Yahshua, I call him Jesus, right? Well, then why not baptizing Leroy? I mean, what's in the name? What's in the name are instructions that those within the divine order gave, okay? The Most High gave specific instructions on what should be done in this name. Go ahead. Why? Because this is how the Most High receives his glory. Yahshua, Yah saves. Go ahead. Yes, sir. Hold on 1 second. We got a mic here.
Messiah said if one will come in his own name, him you will receive.
Absolutely, right? And so we had somebody came in the name of Jesus. And everybody received that, right? Yeah. Okay, Acts chapter 26 and verse 12.
Whereupon as I went to Damascus with authority and commission from the chief priests, at midday, O king, I saw in the way a light from heaven above the brightness of the sun, shining round about me and them which journeyed with me. And when we all were fallen to the earth, I heard a voice speaking unto me and saying in the Hebrew tongue, Saul, Saul, why persecute you me?
And what tongue?
In the Hebrew tongue.
Go ahead.
It is hard for you to kick against the pricks.
And
I said, who are you, master? And he said, I am Yahshua, whom you persecute.
So then let me ask you something then, Yishmael. So then he spoke to him in the Greek tongue, in the Latin tongue.
No, that's right here. It says in the Hebraic tongue.
Then why do you have Jesus here? Huh? Jesus, there's no J in Hebrew. There's no J in Hebrew, right? And in the 16th century, when they created a J, right, in this period, they had a name Isus, which was the pagan god of healing, okay? So it's impossible to say Jesus in a Hebrew tongue, right? Now, how many of you watched Passion? Passion, right? They clearly said Yahshua, but at the bottom, okay, they had Jesus, okay? All right. The apostles delivered, okay, unto the people a Hebraic name by commandment. And when you go back and you look at your secular sources, your historians, your theologians, right, your scholars will tell you Yahshua was never called Jesus in a day in his life. Was never called Jesus. Okay? All right, let's go ahead and pick it up. Acts 10:24 through 28. Jesus was a name that was created by the Gnostics in order to appeal to the Greeks, okay? In order to convert these people under a name that they would be able to be familiar with. and accept. Okay? All right. Acts chapter 10, 24 through 28.
And the morrow after they entered into Caesarea,
Mm-hmm.
and Cornelius waited for them, and had called together his kinsmen and his near friends. And as Simeon was coming in, Cornelius met him and fell down at his feet and worshipped him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Simeon took him up, saying, Stand up.
Uh-huh.
I myself also am a man.
That's right.
And as he talked with him, he went in and found many that were come together.
Mm-hmm.
And he said unto them, You know how that it is unlawful, that it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Hebrew to keep company or come unto one of another nation.
Why would Simeon be concerned with Hebraic law? Why would he be concerned about going into a Gentile's house, right? A house that typically would be classified by our ancestors as being unclean because the people were uncircumcised, till they probably had, pig feet in the refrigerator or something like that. Why would he make this statement? You know that it's unlawful for he who is a Jew, right, to come unto or keep company of one of another nation. Why? Nazarenes, as our secular information stated, right, Nazarenes, right, continued to keep the Sinaitic covenant. The only thing that changed with them was they put down sacrifices. But let's see. Let's go ahead and pick it up at Acts chapter 11, 1 through 4. Let's see if this was just Simeon or if there were any other apostles. I mean, it's very interesting to me. You spend 3.5 years with Yahshua, and Yahshua doesn't communicate any of these things to you about, no, you can go ahead and eat anything you like. What we're going to do after I ascend into heaven, we're going to go ahead and change that Sabbath day to Sunday. As a matter of fact, you can defile yourself. It doesn't matter. You can all that stuff, because after I ascend to heaven, I'm going to do away with all that. None of that stuff was ever communicated. The only thing Yahshua communicated during the 3.5 years that he was evangelizing, he said, worship the Father, believe on me, keep the commandments, love your brother. That's all he said. Go ahead and read.
And the apostles and brethren that were in Judea heard that the Gentiles had also received the word of Elohim. And when Simeon was come up to Jerusalem, they that were of the circumcision contended with him.
And when Simeon was come up to Jerusalem, they that were of the circumcision contended with him, saying, You went in to men uncircumcised, and did eat with them. They had a big issue with this. A big issue. Why? Because this was not Hebraic culture. This was not a part of, this was not clean. This was an act of uncleanliness. And the apostles expressed a concern to Simeon about this action. Okay. Keep your mind on that. Go over to Acts chapter 12, 1 through 4.
Now about that time Herod the king stretched forth his hands to vex certain of the assembly. And he killed Jacob, the brother of Johanan, with the sword.
Mm-hmm.
And because he saw it pleased the Hebrews, he proceeded further to take Simeon also. Then were the days of unleavened bread.
Okay, now Luke is writing to Theophilus, and he's saying to Theophilus, he says, Theophilus, when this took place, right, then were the days of unleavened bread. These were the days of unleavened bread, right? Now, Theophilus, a Christian, okay, and we got commentary on these Christians and so forth, right? Why would Theophilus even be concerned about an unleavened bread? I tell you what, you go and you ask the average Christian today about an unleavened bread. Ask him, have you ever observed unleavened bread? Let me tell you something. The average Christian will tell you, I don't know what that is. Okay, go ahead and read.
And when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison and delivered him to 4 quaternions of soldiers to keep him, intending after the Passover to bring him forth to the people.
Until after Passover to bring him forth to the people. Okay, Passover and unleavened bread. All right. Let's go ahead and pick it up. Acts 13:42 through 45. Why would Luke write to Theophilus, okay, in a manner that Theophilus could not understand? Theophilus understood Passover, Pesach. He also understood unleavened bread. Why? Because they were practicing it. Acts chapter 12, and go ahead and pick it up at verse 1 through, well, we just read that. Go ahead and pick it up at Acts chapter 13. Acts 13, 42 through 45.
And when the Hebrews were gone out of the synagogue, the Gentiles besought that these words might be preached to them the next Shabbat. Now when the congregation was broken up, many of the Hebrews and religious proselytes followed Saul and Barnabas, who speaking to them persuaded them to continue in the grace of Elohim.
Watch this.
And the next Sabbath day came almost the whole city together to hear the word of Elohim.
Okay, the next Sabbath day, they came together, right? The next Sabbath day, they weren't meeting on Sunday. In order to hear the word of Elohim, they knew that they need to show up on the Sabbath day. On the Sabbath day. The ecclesiastical units that were established, okay, were overseen by Hebrews. Apostles, mainly, who were the circuit overseers, and disciples, okay, that may have been placed in an overseeing position. But they knew that the doors opened on the Sabbath day. And the Gentiles, if the Indo-Euro-Asiatic people and any other nationality or ethnic group were going to hear the words of Elohim, they would have to show up on the Sabbath day, not Sunday. You can sit around somebody's synagogue on Sunday, you'll just be sitting on a doorstep, because the doors did not open on Venerable Day Solis. It opened up on the Shabbat. Yes, ma'am. Excuse me? Okay, so you're just teasing me. Okay. All right.
Question.
We have a question back here.
You mentioned about the order in the church among the apostles. You said there was someone who established the church and then he set someone else up. In essence, there was a definable order. How is that reflected in this assembly?
In this assembly here? In this assembly? Well, in this assembly, I'm the overseer, and I have an assistant overseer, if you will, or someone to take my stead in the position or in a time where I'm not able to perform. Is that your question? Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Go ahead and pick it up at Acts chapter 13, and let's pick it up 42 through 45. Okay, we just read that. All right, go over to Acts chapter 15, 18 through 22.
Known unto Elohim are all his works from the beginning of the world. Wherefore my sentence is that we trouble not them which from among the Gentiles are turned to Elohim, but that we write unto them that they abstain from pollution of idols.
That's found in the law code, that they abstain from pollutions of idols. Go ahead.
And from fornication.
And from fornication. That's also in the law code. The law states that if you lie down with a woman, you should endow her to be your wife. Go ahead.
And from things strangled.
And from things strangled. Okay, the law states that you should not eat any animals that die of itself. Go ahead.
And from blood.
And there should not be any bloodletting or blood consumption. These four things are found written in the law code. Okay. And this is what the brother of Yahshua, James, the overseer of the assembly in Jerusalem, stated to the apostles, okay, at this council as it relates to the Gentiles coming into the new covenant assemblies to worship. What are we going to do about these people who are coming into the assembly whom the Pharisees have raised up a good case that they need to be circumcised and keep all of the law of Moses? So what do? And the law states that a Gentile or a stranger must be circumcised if he has been bought with your money or born in your house. This is when he must be circumcised. So here we have Gentiles, okay, not born in a house or bought with our money, specifically dealing with the assemblies that are being established in Antioch and Asia Minor. What are we going to do with these people who are designed to come into a new covenant assembly? And this is what they will agree upon. Go ahead and pick it up at verse 21.
For Moshe of old time has in every city them that teach him, being read in the synagogues every Shabbat day.
Go ahead.
Then pleased it the apostles and elders with the whole assembly to send chosen men of their own company to Antioch with Saul and Barnabas, namely Judas surnamed Barsabas, and Silas, chief men among the brethren.
Okay. For Moses of old time, all right, Moses of old time, not Moses of today, your uncle Moses, your cousin Moses, Moses the drunk, right? We're talking about Moses of old time has in every city them that preach him, being read in the synagogues every Shabbat day. So when this was communicated, we then have Luke writing, then this pleased the apostles and elders with the whole assembly to send chosen men of their own company to Antioch with Saul and Barnabas. Okay, let's pick it up at Acts chapter 16, 11 through 13. So what are we seeing? Again, we see laws that are still being adhered to, that is being extracted, okay, obviously from the Torah, being expounded upon, and people are being held accountable to it. That's number one. Number two, the rest of the laws are going to be communicated to those, right, who are seeking to understand the will of the Most High on the Sabbath day by the teachers of Moses, right? Okay, go ahead. Let's continue with that.
Therefore, loosing from Troas, we came with a straight course to Samathia, and the next day to Neapolis, and from thence to Philippi, which is the chief city of that part of Macedonia, and a colony. And we were in that city abiding certain days.
Okay, here we go.
And on the Sabbath, we went out of the city by a riverside, where prayer was wont to be made. And we sat down and spoke unto the women which resorted there. Okay,
and what you're going to find in the days of old, if there were not funding for an assembly, for people to meet, to hold a convocation, they generally met by riverbanks and different areas, okay, where they had a convocation on the outside. And this is exactly what we see. Read it, verse 11 again, please.
Therefore, loosing from Troas, we came with a straight course to Samaria, and the next day to Neapolis, and from thence to Philippi, which is the chief city of that part of Macedonia, and a colony. And we were in that city abiding certain days. And on the Sabbath, we went out of the city by a riverside, where prayer was wont to be made.
Where prayer was customary on the Sabbath day. And we sat down and spoken to the women which resorted there. Okay, let's go ahead and pick it up at Acts 18, 1 through 4. What we're doing is we are seeing what the Nazarenes' practices were. We're seeing what their practices were, what the Nazarenes' practices were, and then we're going to expound on what the Christians' practices are. Okay, let's go ahead and pick it up at Acts 18, 1 through 4.
After these things, Saul departed from Athens and came to Corinth, and found a certain Jew named Aquila, born in Pontus, lately come from Italy, with his wife Priscilla, because that Claudius had commanded all Jews to depart from Rome, and came unto them. And because he was of the same craft, he abode with them and wrought, and for by their occupation they were tent makers. And he reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath, and persuaded the Jews and the Greeks.
The Jews and the Greeks. It did not say the Jews and the Grecians. It specifically said the Jews and the Greeks, the Hebrews and the Europeans that were meeting in the synagogues, okay, that were practicing the old covenant. And Saul was persuading them, okay, to come under the new covenant. And this is what the Nazarenes did, okay? All right, let's continue. Acts 18:18 through 21.
And Saul after this tarried there yet a good while, and then took his leave of the brethren, and sailed thence into Syria. And with him Priscilla and Aquila, having shorn his head in Cenchrea, for he had a vow. And he came to Ephesus and left them there.
Here you have Paul, a Nazarene. He shaved his head because he had a vow. This is number the 6th chapter. This is found in the Torah. This is found in the law book, okay? So he takes a Nazarite vow, okay, separates himself unto Elohim. What's your time stamp on this?
54 AD.
What? 54 AD. 54 AD. Okay, go ahead.
And he came to Ephesus and left them there, but he himself entered into the synagogue and reasoned with the Jews. When they desired to him to tarry longer time with them, he consented not, but bade them farewell, saying, I must by all means keep this feast that comes in Jerusalem, but I will return again unto you if Elohim will.
So here we have 12 years after the death of the Messiah. Saul is taking a Nazarite vow. Nobody forced him to take a Nazarite vow, okay, found in Numbers the 6th chapter. And then he says to the assembly at Ephesus, okay, he says, I must go to Jerusalem to keep this feast. I must go to Jerusalem to keep this feast. And Paul's a ringleader of who?
Sect of the Nazarenes.
Sect of the Nazarenes. Okay, let's go ahead and pick it up at Acts 20, verse 6. Acts 20, we want to have a biblical and a historical understanding of the practices of this sect, the group that's called the Sect of the Nazarenes. Acts 20, and let's pick it up at 6.
And we sailed away from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread.
And we sailed away from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread. Why would they sail away from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread? Can anybody tell me? Can anybody tell me? Where's my mic? Go ahead, Saul. Why would they sail away from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread? Go ahead.
Because it's commanded for them to keep these feast days.
So they were keeping, right, the 7 days of unleavened bread outside of Jerusalem. Why? Because the Nazarenes were not what? Under the sacrificial ordinances. But yet they continued to keep the convocations wherever they were. After the days of unleavened bread, then they sailed. Okay? All right. And what's your time stamp on this?
59 AD.
59 AD. All right, go ahead and pick it up at verses 13 through 16.
And we went before.
So here we have 26 years after the death of the Messiah. 26 years, keeping 7 days of unleavened bread. 7 days of unleavened bread. Go ahead.
And we went before to ship and sailed unto Assos, there intending to take in Saul, for so had he appointed minding himself to go afoot. And when he met with us at Assos, we took him in and came to Mytilene, and we sailed thence and came to the next day over against Chios. And the next day we arrived at Samos and tarried at Troglium, and the next day we came to Miletus. For Saul had determined to sail by Ephesus,
because he would not spend the time in Asia, for he hasted, if it were possible for him, to be at Jerusalem the day of Pentecost. The day of Pentecost. Okay? All right, we're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break here, and we're going to come back and pick up the second part and the conclusion of our discussion.